You got a 3D pen to make all these cool three-dimensional projects, right? But now that you have it, it feels awkward. You are mostly just fighting with gravity, getting frustrated, blaming the pen or yourself. So do you need 10,000 hours of practice? No. All you need is a strategy. We can't win against gravity, but we can sneak around it. Drawing in 2D is easy, like with any other pen, because all points of this circle are supported by the work surface. The issue starts when you need to reach up into the third dimension, where there are no support points to attach anything to. We need to create at least one stable point to get a leg up into the above space, either with a tool or preferably with some stable jig that doesn't shake like human hand does. Or make the initial part on a flat surface, and once it's cooled and solid, raise it and continue from there. Here are 6 portals to the third dimension. All start on a solid ground, but continue up in different ways. Each method has a trade-off, so let's look at their pros and cons. That way you can decide which one is right for your next project. And keep in mind, this is not a complete list. Make the first shape on safe, flat, solid ground. Support it with something that will make a right angle, and keep going from there. Build your project as you go by rotating it strategically, so the part that needs to be made next always happens to conveniently rest on a solid work surface. This works for way more complicated shapes than just a simple cube. Icosahedron, for example. You may need a different angle support, but it is the same strategy. The shortcoming of this method is that you can only make things that have flat parts that can rest on the work surface. Even if it's 20 triangles and the shape looks almost round, it is still a faceted shape. Also, it is rather fragile, and you will be tempted to fill the parts in to provide more support. As long as your fill is linear and lace-like, it will still look great and intentional. Once you make the surface completely solid, you will get heavily textured, messy-looking finish, which you may not like. The solution to that is counterintuitive. Let's start with the finish. The advantage of this method is that it allows you to not only smooth your surfaces, but create any complex multicolored veneer you may possibly want without having to manually smooth, sand, or paint. The finishing can be done either by baking or by ironing or by melting it on a stovetop or an electric griddle. The reason this must start as a flat sheet is that three-dimensional object will melt with heat and you will get a puddle. Once the sheet is cooled, you cut it into components and proceed to make whatever three-dimensional project you were planning to make. With any customized finish the occasion calls for. I know what you're thinking. What about curves? You can resoften it again with more heat and reshape it into tubes. or cones, and then assemble those into a finished project. The customized veneer surfaces look great and allow for unlimited creativity. The downside of this method is that it requires extra heating equipment besides your pen. Another con is that the design is limited to projects that could be made from a flat sheet of paper. You can make tubes and cones, but once you try to make a ball out of a flat sheet, it gets a bit awkward. Time for strategy number 3, which is working on a curved surface. Armature can be either temporary or permanent. Temporary armature can be as simple as a found object. You just have to make sure any object you use can take the heat of the pen and the plastic sticks to it. If it doesn't, make it more user-friendly by spraying it with matte acrylic sealer or hairspray until it works. The problem with this method is you are limited to finding objects of the right size and shape for the project at hand. If you want the ultimate control over the shape of your sculpture, the best temporary armature is clay. Not all clays work for this. Some have problems when combined with the plastic and the heat of the pen. So before you go clay shopping, watch this video. The link is in the description. Or just use Play-Doh to start with, which actually works surprisingly well. This way you get exactly the shape you want, even when there are complicated convex and concave curves on the same piece. The added bonus of this armature is that it provides support when you make the fill, guarding you against gravity cave-ins. In the end, you remove it and reuse it, and you are done. If your project doesn't need to be hollow, you can also use an armature that stays inside your sculpture permanently, like aluminum foil. Now you may wonder, why would we even need yet another method? Well, sometimes the sculpture you want to make is just too small for any armature to fit into it. This is what the 3D pens were made for. You will still need a leg up to the 3rd dimension, but a single line is enough, and then you just keep going. Here is where you might start to fight with gravity. If you don't support your work, or work too fast, or too long in the same place. So take your time and switch the place where you work after each edition. Besides the potential meltdowns, another difficulty of this method is that making curves in mid-air is challenging. The plastic stretches from point A to point B in a straight line, and if you want a curve, you have to form it in those 15 seconds before the line cools, tightens, and solidifies. The good news is that it can be resoftened again with the addition of new hot plastic, and you get to fix your curve if you don't succeed on the first try. You can make some cute little critters this way. Now let's say working small is not your thing and you want to make something huge. Beach ball size sphere, entire battlefield, or a landscape for your model railroad. Things you would think 3D pens cannot handle. I first thought of trying this method when I was considering what would be the best way to make patterns for 3D pen projects. I realized we have already come up with a good way to project 3D shapes onto a flat plane, and that is a topographical map. It is a precise record of a shape. All we need to do is put the elevation back in it. Make the first contour. While it's cooling, make the second one. Then lift the first one hair off the ground. Bridge them together. And repeat. Works for any object, not just maps. The beauty of this method is that all complex and precise curves are done 100% on the flat surface and raised later. Downside of this method is that if you are making something that needs to be perfectly symmetrical, things can get a bit out of line, literally. You get crooked bottles and lopsided balls. So our last method is an improvement of this one, and it is keeping the project in line with the central axis. All you need is a perpendicular wire sticking out of your work surface. Again, all complicated curves are made on a solid ground, and while you are at it, you connect each layer to the central wire. Which allows you to stack it perfectly centered, no matter what size. Depending on the size, you have to get creative with the spacers you use. Ideal method for vessels and baskets. Anything that you would ordinarily make on a lathe or a potter's wheel. If you need the shape to be hollow, once the project is assembled, you just edit the centering lines out. And you are done. The downside is this network is fragile, which is sometimes okay and sometimes not. Many of the projects you just saw already have their own videos, and I will link them in the description if you are interested in trying some of these methods. And here is a link to some more beginner's tips if you are just getting started. So until next time, go and make something.